I'm Robert John Hadfield. Thank you so much for joining us for this special event. Today we're celebrating the life, the music, and the incredible legacy of Ozzy Osbourne with a 24-hour marathon featuring some of our favorite Ozzy and Black Sabbath videos from the Audio Mover archives. If you're new here, welcome. Audio Mover is dedicated to the history of classic rock. We dive into the stories behind the albums, the artists, the magazines, the concerts, and the moments that helped shape the music we all grew up with. We now have hundreds of videos covering everyone from Black Sabbath and Ozzy to Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Rush, Deep Purple, Def Leppard, so many more. As many of you know, one of the highlights of this channel came last year when Jack Osbourne shared one of our Ozzy tribute videos. That single post introduced Audio Mover to thousands of new viewers around the world, and we're incredibly grateful for everyone who has joined this community since then. So throughout today's marathon, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, share your favorite Ozzy memory, or simply let us know which album has meant the most to you over the years. We're streaming this event across several different platforms, but YouTube is our main home, where we've recently passed 37,000 subscribers. So if you enjoy classic rock history and the stories behind the music, we'd love to have you become part of the Audio Mover community. So thanks again for spending part of your day with us. We've got an incredible lineup ahead, so let's get started. Sometimes I start these videos off with a little trivia question. This one's probably maybe a little easier than most. And the question is, what do this album and this album have in common? We have Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz, which came out on September 12th of 1980. And we have Uriah Heep, Abominog, which came out in April of 1982. And I don't know what it was about that album cover. For some reason, it kind of reminded me of that. You remember the movie Creep Show? And there was that crate, and it was under the stairs or something, had that huge mouth. Anyway, I don't know what it was about that, but I remember seeing that for the first time. One of the creepiest album covers. Anyway, and it's actually not a bad album. It's got some cool stuff on it. But anyway, what got me thinking about this was I was looking at this old Hit Parader magazine. This is from fall of 1984. I was reading this article about Ozzy, and there were some really interesting things in here. First of all, did you know that Ozzy protested one of his own shows? He talks about that in here. He also talks about one of the bands he worked with that was the same offstage and on stage, and was sometimes even too crazy for him. Also briefly talks about how this is no longer called Blizzard of Oz. It's just kind of his solo thing. And I know that's kind of a strange issue, but he actually addresses it a little bit in this article. And so I'm going to read this to you, and it says, "Inside the Asylum. With Bark at the Moon securing his position as the high priest of macabre metal, Ozzy Osbourne remains one of the most controversial and popular figures in rock history. Despite more than 15 years reigning the rock domain, to many people, Ozzy remains the ultimate enigma. A man capable of being a bat-biting geek." That's kind of a funny... Do you remember that word being used that way? I don't know. Anyway, just was a strange word to use there. Bat-biting geek, or a charming gentleman with equal aplomb. Here now is an inside look at Ozzy Osbourne, the man, the myth, the loon. Okay, Hit Parader. Ozzy, looking back over your career, is there anything that you'd have changed? Ozzy, really not a darn thing. There have been good times and there have been some bad, but they've all helped make me who I am, and that's something I have no desire to change. Now, one thing to put this in context is pretty fascinating. When this article is being published, Ozzy is 35. And so he's been around for a little while now, but still, you know, you think of those things in those terms, and that's still so, I mean, to me right now, thinking of 35, that's so young. But anyway, that just kind of puts this in context that he is well into his career, but compared to, you know, he just kept going and going. He was actually still fairly young. And that's what's, to me, that's also kind of interesting when you look at these interviews, to think of the fact that he's really not that far removed from Black Sabbath. This is 1984, so you're talking about just a few years earlier was when he left Black Sabbath. I'm the luckiest man alive to be able to do what I do and get away with it. I've become famous by acting in ways that other people may have been arrested for. I love that line. Hit Parader. But it's true that much of what you do is an act. You're not the crazy man that everybody imagines all the time, are you? Ozzy, I couldn't be. I'd go absolutely crazy.
I know that during the last tour, I would hang out with Motley Crue in the hotel bars. Those guys are amazing. They're crazy rock and rollers 24 hours a day. They're the same off stage and on. And that actually answers the question I was talking about a minute ago, where, and if you saw The Dirt, I don't know, man, they made Ozzy look way crazier than Motley Crue. But at least from Ozzy's perspective here, Motley Crue is just this wild group of people. And he goes on and talks more about that in a minute. I watched them for a while throwing peanuts at people, and I said to my wife, Sharon, I guess I'm getting old. I can't be Ozzy all the time anymore. It's great when people see me sitting in a restaurant and they stare at me like I'm going to do something crazy at any moment. A lot of the time, I don't disappoint them. Again, it's really important to think of these things in context, because the guys in Motley Crue would have been so much younger than him. Ozzy is now 35 years old, and you know what that was like. You know, you start getting into that point, and you're married, and you've got a couple of kids, and even though you have a little bit of that energy left in you, the stuff that you did in your early 20s, there's part of you that goes, I don't know if I really want to participate in that quite the way I used to. Okay, what was the craziest thing that happened on the last tour? I know there weren't any animals killed or bats bitten, but I'm sure there was a fair share of lunacy anyhow. Ozzy. I guess the strangest thing I did was in one place where a group of religious freaks were protesting my appearance. They were saying all the standard crap about me worshiping the devil, and they had organized a picket line outside the arena. I thought to myself that they really didn't know what they were protesting. And on top of that, they probably didn't even know who I was. To prove that point, I made up a sign with a smiling face that said, "Have a nice day." I joined the end of their picket line and they didn't even notice me. That shows you how crazy those people are. Now, I don't know if this happened for sure or not. I didn't look it up to see if there was any other evidence of this happening. But that is a fascinating idea. You know, and how many of you remember that stuff? You'd go to these concerts and you'd have these people out there with the, big cross and a megaphone telling everybody not to go in because it was the devil's music. And anyway, just looking back now, it all seems so silly. But at the time, people were really, really serious about it. So anyway, and of course, bands like Ozzy and Iron Maiden and Motley Crue, and there were so many groups. Matter of fact, I think I even saw that out in front of a Journey concert. It was just everywhere. These people protesting this rock music, And so whatever, it was just kind of fascinating stuff. Hit Prater, why does it bother you so much that people have singled you out as the symbol of rock's demonic image? Ozzy, basically because it's totally untrue. No matter what I say or do, people say that I'm Satan himself. Look at the Bark at the Moon cover. The cover has nothing at all to do with the devil, but just because I'm dressed up like a werewolf, people say it has to do with Satan. What rubbish. They even say that a song like Rock and Roll Rebel shows I'm in league with the devil. If they took the time to listen to the lyrics, they'd know they're completely wrong. I say, they think I worship the devil, they only see through his eyes. To me, that says it all. They only see and hear what they want. And by the way, I got that album out. I actually remember seeing this for the first time. And it was, I don't know, it creeped me out a little bit. But I mean, again, looking back at this stuff, this is all just, it's all just entertainment. And it's all showmanship. And it's all just imagery to make things more interesting. And this kind of stuff spoke to, people our age that were into this kind of music, and it kind of represented that stuff. And it's just, there's just something really important about that last line, because it just applies to so many things. They only see and hear what they want. And that's a principle that just applies so far beyond any of this stuff right here. But I think that was really, really true with so many of these people that were protesting. You see you find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for this kind of stuff in the music, you're going to find it. But isn't outrage what really has made you famous? Do you think if it wasn't for your image, you'd be as successful as you've been? Ozzy, I don't know. I think everyone has something in them and would like to be like me to a certain extent. We all have a little crazy in us. I just let that come out. People of all ages seem to have a macabre fascination with me. It's like an auto accident. You know you might not like what you see, but you feel an incredible urge to go over and look. And there's a lot of truth to this too, because when you look back at the early Black Sabbath days, he wasn't this. It was this really got enhanced the more and more he got into his, solo career. Just this really over the top craziness. And but perhaps, there really was something to that when he got on that solo career, that did, those legends, those things going from town to town, hearing all the stuff, he bites the head off the dove and the bat, and then it just grows and grows and grows. You know what I'm talking about. And somehow that just, the legend becomes part of it. And of course, then he becomes more and more famous, not just for what he actually did, but for the legend that follows him. Hit Parader, what causes that fascination? Ozzy, people want to be scared or see something out of the ordinary. That's why horror movies are successful. I know that at my shows, people come to see the most bizarre things even I'd never think of doing. And by the way, again, this is such an important point, because when you think about why Black Sabbath was called Black Sabbath, some of those early discussions, I think it was Tony Iommi that talked about this, that said they came to this realization that people pay money to go be scared in movies. And so they thought, well, we could actually be just the music version of that same thing, because people enjoy it. People like to be scared. They like to feel those emotions. And so Black Sabbath and then Ozzy found a way just to tap into these things that people like to experience this stuff. And so much of just heavy metal in general did that. It created these emotions because people like to feel things. And so the music actually helped you feel something. And so anyway, and it helped. And like he says here, then people started coming to his shows looking for things, like he said, that he wouldn't even do. We played in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania during this tour, and there was this mature couple in the front row. They had to be in their early 30s, and they kept jumping up every time we played a fast song. It was like they were waiting for me to go over and saw the guitarist's legs off or something. Every time I didn't do that, they'd sit down. It was like the music and the show were irrelevant. They wanted to see something totally insane. Okay, and then here's this quote: Motley Crue has been great. They're totally insane. People say I'm the crazy man of rock. They have to see those guys in action, which is kind of funny. Now, I think there's kind of a typo here, because Ozzy now answers a question